Welcome to our kitchen. Today we prepare a famous Italian dish that usually we don't associate with the Middle Ages, pizza. Very different from the modern version, and not just for the obvious absence of tomatoes. We start with ingredients. We need the white wheat flour, sourdough, cheese, lard and quails. First, we prepare the dough. We need white wheat flour, salt, sourdough, and warm water. Pizza, in other sources spelled pitta, pinza, or pizza, appears for the first time in a 10th century document called Codex Diplomaticus Cayetanus that records a contract for the rent of a water mill. In addition to the payment, 12 pizze are due every year on Christmas and Easter to the landlord. Pitta is mentioned also in a few Byzantine sources, dating back to a later period. We don't know exactly what pizza was in the 10th century, but we have a few recipes written in the following centuries, in which we find two variants of it. One is a kind of focaccia. The other is a very complex preparation with many layers of pasta alternated with meat and other ingredients, as described by Bartolomeo Scappi in the 16th century. Pizza can be savory or sweet, and the sweet variant appears not only in the early sources, but also in the 19th century texts, such as the famous cookbook by Pellegrino Artusi. We let the dough rise overnight. We coat the quails with lard and sprinkle 2 or 3 pinches of salt. Then we roast them in the oven for about 20 minutes. We selected this recipe from a 15th century book of dietetics, De Honesta Voluptate et Valetudine, by Bartolomeo Scacchi, known as Platina. The source contains also recipes, mainly taken from Maestro Martino's cookbook. There are 2 versions of Platina's book, the original one in Latin, the other in Italian. The recipe we're preparing today is called placenta in Latin and pizza or fugazza in Italian. According to a 17th century author, Vincenzo Tanara, pizza is called in many ways in the various Italian regions, and one of these names is indeed placenta, a term we found a few months ago preparing the ancient Roman placenta from Cato's De Agricultura. You find the link to the video in the description below. When the quails are done, we let them cool down. Meanwhile, we cut the cheese into small pieces. In the chapter dedicated to pizza, Platina describes a few methods. The one we are preparing today consists in making bread dough, let it rest, and then knead it with the meat of birds, the fat of these birds, and cheese cut into pieces. The way to make bread is described in another chapter and is the common one. Knead the flour after removing the bran with warm water and let it leaven. Pizza made with bread dough is described also in a 17th century collection of tales written in Neapolitan, Locunto dei Conti, by Giambattista Basile. For this recipe we used scamorza, a kind of cheese very similar to one of the most common medieval and Renaissance cheeses, called provatura, prepared with the same technique described by Columella in his De Re Rustica. Then we debone the quails. The author writes just to use little birds, so you can choose any kind of bird. If you prefer, you can use chicken or duck. Bartolomeo Scappi describes a layered pizza prepared with pigeon, one of the most prized meats in the historical Italian cuisine. A simpler variant described by Platina consists in mixing flour, warm water, cured pork fatback cut into little cubes or butter, and fennel seeds. The dough is then flattened into a circular form with your hands or a rolling pin. We add to the dough a couple of spoons of the quail drippings. A couple of centuries later, we find several pizza variants in the book L'economia del cittadino in villa by Vincenzo Tanara, mentioned before. The author considers pizza a kind of pie, made usually with melted cured pork fatback, butter or oil, sometimes with the addition of other ingredients. But he specifies that there is not just one way to make pizza. Everyone make it how they prefer. There are variants with sugar or honey, others with almonds or walnuts, as peasants commonly do. Others with meat, fruit or vegetables, kneaded with the dough. Then we add the cheese and quails and knead until all the ingredients are evenly distributed inside the dough. Still today there is a traditional southern Italian dish called pitta, which is a sort of focaccia in which the ingredients are kneaded together or stuffed into the dough, prepared in several ways, both sweet and savory. Roman pinza instead is similar to pizza, but with an elongated form, with many different ingredients on top. We divide the dough according to the size of our cooking pan. We will flatten the dough until it is about half a finger thick. We grease a pan with lard and lay the dough, then flatten it with the hands. The dish that today we call pizza is actually quite recent. In a 19th century book by Francesco de Burchard, titled Gli usi e costumi di Napoli, we find a description of pizza shaped in the same way as today, made from a piece of dough. The author considers pizza a specialty of Naples. Pizza can be prepared with any ingredient you want, the author writes, but also with just oil or cured pork fatback. The most common is seasoned with oil, garlic, oregano and salt, sometimes with fish. Others with cheese, cured pork fatback and basil, sometimes adding mozzarella. Other common ingredients are prosciutto or tomatoes. The text is very interesting and contains plenty of information about early pizza, with vivid descriptions of the work of the pizzaiolo and his customers. We cook the pizza in the oven for about 20 minutes. This pizza is simply great. Probably today we wouldn't call it pizza, but rather focaccia. The flavor of the fat is perfectly blended with the crust, but each morsel contains different aromas. First, the melted scamorza that gives a bit of sweetness. Then, the little pieces of meat that give complexity to the general flavor. It is impossible to stop eating until it is finished, and one would eat even the crumbs. The only side effect is that you have to prepare a huge quantity of this pizza to satisfy all your family or guests. Once tried a bit, one needs to eat more and more. If you're interested in ancient foods and flavor, or you're just looking for unusual and delicious recipes, please subscribe our channel and consider supporting us on Patreon, where you will find once a week a new article about historical cooking and once a month a historical source translated into English and Italian.